Readings from Marcovaldo by Italo Calvino. Autumn 11. The Poisonous Rabbit. When the day comes to leave the hospital, you already know it in the morning, and if you're in good shape, you move around the wards, practicing the way you're going to walk when you're outside. You whistle, act like a well man with those still sick, not to arouse envy, but for the pleasure of adopting a tone of encouragement. You see the sun beyond the big panes of the fog, if there's fog. You hear the sounds of the city, and everything is different from before, when every morning you felt them enter, the light and the sound of an unattainable world, as you woke behind the bars of that bed. Now, outside, there is your world again. The healed man recognizes it as natural and usual, and suddenly he notices once more the smell of the hospital. Marcovaldo one morning was sniffing around like that, cured, waiting for them to write certain things in his health insurance book so that he could leave. The doctor took his paper, said to him, "Wait here," and left him alone in the office. Marcovaldo looked at the white enameled furniture he had so hated, the test tubes full of grim substances, and tried to cheer himself with the thought that he was about to leave it all. But he couldn't manage to feel the joy he would have expected. Perhaps it was the idea of going back to the warehouse to shift packing cases, or of the mischief his children had surely been up to in his absence. And especially of the fog outside that made him think of having to step out into the void, to dissolve in a damp nothingness. And so he looked around with a vague need to feel affection towards something in here, but everything he saw reminded him of torture or discomfort. Then he saw a rabbit in a cage. It was a white rabbit with a long fluffy coat, a pink triangle of a nose, amazed red eyes, ears almost furless, flattened against its back. It wasn't all that big, but in the narrow cage its crouching oval body made the wire screen bulge, and clumps of fur stuck out, ruffled by a slight trembling. Outside the cage, on the table, there was some grass and the remains of a carrot. Marcovaldo thought of how unhappy the animal must be, shut up in there, seeing that carrot, but not being able to eat it. And he opened the door of the cage. The rabbit didn't come out. It stayed there, still, with only a slight twitch of its face, as if it were pretending to chew in order to seem nonchalant. Marcovaldo took the carrot and held it closer, then slowly drew it back to urge the rabbit to come out. The rabbit followed him, cautiously bit the carrot, and began gnawing it diligently in Marcovaldo's hand. The man stroked it on the back and meanwhile squeezed it to see if it was fat. He felt it was somewhat bony under its coat. From this fact, and from the way it pulled on the carrot, it was obvious that they had kept it on short rations. If it belonged to me, Marcovaldo thought, I would stuff it until it became a ball. And he looked at it with the loving eyes of the breeder who manages to allow kindness towards the animal to coexist with anticipation of the roast, all in one emotion. There, after days and days of sordid stay in the hospital, at the moment of leaving, he discovered a friendly presence, which would have sufficed to fill his hours and his thoughts. And he had to leave it, go back into the foggy city where you don't encounter rabbits. The carrot was almost finished. Marcovaldo took the animal into his arms while he looked around for something else to feed him. He held its nose to a potted geranium on the doctor's desk, but the animal indicated it didn't like the plant. At the same moment, Marcovaldo heard the doctor's step coming back. How could he explain why he was holding the rabbit in his arms? He was wearing his heavy work coat, tight at the waist. In a hurry, he stuck the rabbit inside, buttoned his coat all the way up, and to keep the doctor from seeing that wriggling bulge at his stomach, he shifted it around to his back. The rabbit, frightened, behaved itself. Marcovaldo collected his papers and moved the rabbit to his chest, because he had to turn and leave. And so, with the rabbit hidden under his coat, he left the hospital and went to work. "Ah, you're cured at last," the foreman, Signor Villagelmo, seeing him arrive. "And what's that growth there?" And he pointed to the bulging chest. "I'm wearing a hot poultice to prevent cramps," Marcovaldo said. At that, the rabbit twitched, and Marcovaldo jumped up like an epileptic. "Now what's come over you?" Villagelmo said. "Nothing. Hiccups," he answered, and with one hand he shoved the rabbit behind his back. "You're still a bit seedy, I noticed," the boss said. The rabbit was trying to crawl up his back, and Marcovaldo shrugged hard to send it down again. "You're shivering. Go home for another day, and make sure you're well tomorrow." Marcovaldo came home carrying the rabbit by its ears like a lucky hunter. "Papa, Papa," the children hailed him, running to meet him. "Where did you catch it? Can we have it? Is it a present for us?" And they tried to grab it at once. "You're back," his wife said, and from the look she gave him, Marcovaldo realized that his period of hospitalization had served only to enable her to accumulate new grievances against him. "A live animal? What are you going to do with it? It'll make messes all over the place." Marcovaldo cleared the table and set the rabbit down in the middle, where it huddled flat, as if trying to vanish. "Don't anybody dare touch it," he said. "This is our rabbit, and it's going to fatten up peacefully until Christmas." "Is it male or female?" Michelino asked. Marcovaldo had given no thought to the possibility of its being a female. A new plan immediately occurred to him. If it was a female, he could mate her and start raising rabbits. And already in his imagination the damp walls disappeared and the room was a green farm among the fields. But it was a male, all right. Still, Marcovaldo had now got this idea of raising rabbits into his head. It was a male, but a very handsome male, for whom a bride should be found and the means to raise a family. "What are we going to feed it when we don't have enough for ourselves?" his wife asked sharply. "Let me give it some thought," Marcovaldo said. The next day at work, from some green potted plants in the management office, which he was supposed to take out every morning, water, then put back, he removed one leaf each, broad leaves, shining on one side and opaque on the other, and stuck them into his overalls. Then, when one of the girls came in with a bunch of flowers, he asked her, "Did your boyfriend give them to you? Aren't you going to give me one?" And he pocketed that too. To a boy peeling a pear, he said, "Leave me the peel." And so a leaf here, a peeling there, a petal somewhere else, he hoped to feed the animal. At a certain point, Signor Villaguillermo sent for him. "Can they have noticed the plants are missing leaves?" Marcovaldo wondered, accustomed always to feeling guilty. In the foreman's office there was the doctor from the hospital, 2 Red Cross men, and a city policeman. "Listen," the doctor said, "a rabbit has disappeared from my laboratory. If you know anything about it, you'd better not try to act smart, because we've injected it with the germs of a terrible disease, and it can spread through the whole city. I didn't ask if you eaten it. If you had, you'd be dead and gone by now." An ambulance was waiting outside. They rushed and got in it, and with the siren screaming constantly, they went through the streets and avenues to Marcovaldo's house, and along the way there remained a wake of leaves and peelings and flowers that Marcovaldo sadly threw out of the window. Marcovaldo's wife that morning simply didn't know what to put in the pot. She looked at the rabbit her husband had brought home the day before, now in a makeshift cage filled with shavings. It arrived just at the right moment, she said to herself. There's no money. His wages have already gone for the extra medicines the public health doesn't cover. The shops won't give us any more credit. Raise rabbits, indeed, or wait till Christmas to roast it. We're skipping meals and we're supposed to fatten the rabbit. "Isolina," she said to her daughter, "you're a big girl now. You have to learn how to cook a rabbit. You begin by killing it and skinning it, and then I'll tell you what to do next." Isolina was reading a magazine of sentimental romances. "No," she whined, "you begin by killing it and skinning it, and I'll watch how you cook it." "What a help," her mother said. "I don't have the heart to kill it, but I know it's a very easy matter. You just have to hold it by the ears and hit it hard on the back of the head. As for skinning, we'll see." "We won't see anything," the daughter said, without raising her nose from the magazine. "I'm not hitting a live rabbit on the head, and I haven't the slightest notion of skinning it either." The 3 little ones had listened to this dialogue with wide eyes. Their mother pondered for a moment, looked at them, then said, "Children." The children, as if by agreement, turned their backs on their mother and left the room. "Wait, children," their mother said. "I wanted to ask you if you'd like to take the rabbit outside. We'll tie a pretty ribbon around its neck, and you can go for a walk with him." The children stopped and exchanged looks. "A walk where?" Michelino asked. "Oh, a little stroll. Then go call on Signor Mira. Show her the rabbit and ask her if she'll please kill it and skin it for us. She's so good at that." The mother had found the right method. Children, as everyone knows, are caught up by the thing they like most, and they prefer not to think of the rest. And so they found a long, lilac-colored ribbon, tied it around the animal's neck, and used it for a leash, fighting over it, and pulling after them the reluctant, half-strangled rabbit. "Tell Signora Mira," the mother insisted, "that she can keep a leg for herself." "No, better the head. Oh, she can take her pick." The children had barely gone out when Marcovaldo's room was surrounded and invaded by orderlies, doctors, guards, and policemen. Marcovaldo was in their midst, more dead than alive. "Where is the rabbit that was taken from the hospital? Hurry! Show us where it is, but don't touch it. It's infected with the germs of a terrible disease." Marcovaldo led them to the cage, but it was empty. "Already eaten? No, no. Where is it then?" "It's Signora Diomira's." The pursuers resumed their hunt. They knocked at Signora Diomira's door. "Rabbit? What rabbit? Are you crazy?" Seeing her house invaded by strangers in white jackets or uniforms looking for a rabbit, the old woman nearly had a stroke. She knew nothing about Marcovaldo's rabbit. In fact, the three children, trying to save the rabbit from death, had decided to take it to a safe place, play with it for a while, and then let it go. And instead of stopping at Signora Diomira's landing, they decided to climb up to a terrace over the rooftops. They would tell their mother it had broken the leash and run off. But no animal seemed so ill-suited to an escape as that rabbit. Making it climb all those steps was a problem. It huddled, frightened, on each step. In the end, they picked it up and carried it. On the terrace, they wanted to make it run. It wouldn't run. They tried setting it on the edge of the roof to see if it would walk the way cats do, but it seemed to suffer vertigo. They tried hoisting it onto a TV antenna to see if it could keep its balance. No, it fell down. Bored, the children ripped away the leash, turned the animal loose at a place where all the paths of the roofs opened out, an oblique and angular sea, and they left. When it was alone, the rabbit began moving. It ventured a few steps, looked around, changed direction, turned, then, in little hops and skips, it started over the roofs. It was an animal born prisoner. Its yearning for liberty did not have broad horizons. The greatest gift it had known in life was the ability to have a few moments free of fear. Now it could move, with nothing around to frighten it, perhaps for the first time in its life. The place was unfamiliar, but a clear concept of familiar and unfamiliar was something it had never been able to formulate. And ever since it had begun to feel an undefined, mysterious ailment gnawing inside itself, the whole world was of less and less interest to it. And so it went on to the roofs, and the cats that saw it hopping didn't understand what it was, and they drew back in awe. Meanwhile, from skylights, from dormer windows, from flat decks, the rabbit's itinerary had not gone unremarked. Some people began to display basins of salad on their sills, peeking then from behind the curtains. Others threw a paracord on the roof tiles and spread a string lasso around it. Someone else arranged a row of bits of carrot along the parapet, leading to his own window. And a rallying cry ran through all the families who were living in the garrets. "Stewed rabbit today!" or "fricasseed rabbit!" or "roast rabbit!" The animal had noticed these lures, these silent offers of food. And though it was hungry, it didn't trust them. It knew that every time humans tried to attract it with offers of food, something obscure and painful happened. Either they stuck a syringe into its flesh, or a scalpel, or they forced it into a buttoned-up jacket, or they dragged it along with a ribbon around its neck. And the memory of these misfortunes merged with the pain it felt inside, with the slow change of organs that it sensed, with the prescience of death and hunger. But as if it knew that all of these discomforts only hunger could be allayed, and recognized that these treacherous human beings could provide, in addition to cruel sufferings, a sense, which it also needed, of protection, of domestic warmth, it decided to surrender to play the human's game. Then whatever had to happen would happen. So it began to eat the bits of carrot, following the trail that, as the rabbit well knew, would make it prisoner and martyr again, but savoring once more, and perhaps for the last time, the good earthy flavor of vegetables. Now it was approaching the garret window. Now a hand would stretch out to catch it. Instead, all of a sudden, the window slammed and closed it out. This one was an event alien to its experience, a trap that refused to snap shut. The rabbit turned, looked for other signs of treachery around, to choose the best one to give in to. But meanwhile the leaves of salad had been drawn indoors, the lassos thrown away, the lurking people had vanished, windows and skylights were now barred, terraces were deserted. It so happened that a police truck had passed through the city with a loudspeaker shouting, "Attention! Attention! A long-haired white rabbit has been lost. It is affected by a serious contagious disease. Anyone finding it should be informed that it is poisonous to eat. Even its touch can transmit harmful germs. Anyone seeing it should alert the nearest police station, hospital, or firehouse." Terror spread over the rooftops. Everyone was on guard, and the moment they sighted the rabbit, which, with a limp flop, moved from one roof to the next, they gave the alarm, and all disappeared as if at the approach of a swarm of locusts. The rabbit proceeded, teetering on the cornices. This sense of solitude, just at the moment when it had discovered the necessity of human nearness, seemed even more menacing to it, unbearable. Meanwhile, Cavalier Ulrico, the old hunter, had loaded his rifle with cartridges for hare, and had gone to take his stand on a terrace, hiding behind a chimney. When he saw the white shadow of the rabbit emerge from the fog, he fired, but his emotion at the thought of the animal's evil bane was so great that the spatter of shot fell a bit off the mark onto the tiles like hail. The rabbit heard the shot rattle all around, and one pellet pierced its ear. It understood. This was a declaration of war. At this point, all relations with mankind were broken off. And in its contempt for humans at what seemed to the rabbit somehow a base ingratitude, it decided to end it all. The roof, covered with corrugated iron, sloped down, oblique, and ended at the void, in the opaque nothingness of the fog. The rabbit planted itself there on all four paws, first cautiously, then letting itself go, and so, slipping, surrounded and consumed by its pain, it went towards death. At the edge, the drain pipe delayed it for a second, then it tumbled down, and it landed in the gloved hands of a fireman perched at the top of a portable ladder. Foiled even in that extreme act of animal dignity, the rabbit was bundled into the ambulance, which set off full tilt towards the hospital. Also aboard were Marcovaldo, his wife, and his children, to be interned for observation and for a series of vaccine tests.